She left me for being poor unaware. I was heir to $500 million. 5 years later, she stood at my gate. Part 1. When she chose to leave love behind for a future without me. The rain hammered against the metal roof of my small garage on Avenida del Sol in Tucson, Arizona, like it was trying to wash away the day's grime. It was late past 10:42 p.m. on that sticky June night, and I was still bent under the hood of a beat-up 2007 pickup truck. Sweat mixed with oil streaked my faded shirt, and my hands were black from grease. The old wall clock flickered, ticking closer to 11. I wiped my forehead with a rag, glancing at the photo propped against my toolbox, the one of me and my eccentric uncle Benjamin Carter. He'd always said, kindness and silence are the greatest assets of an underestimated man. Those words stuck with me, even if I didn't know why back then. I finally called it quits, locking up the garage and heading home in my rusty old truck. The streets were slick, reflecting the streetlights like shattered glass. When I pulled into our driveway, the house lights were still on, which was unusual. Harper usually turned them off early to save on the bill. I stepped inside, kicking off my boots, and there she was standing in the middle of the living room. She looked out of place in that elegant emerald dress, her hair perfectly styled, like she was headed to some fancy event I wasn't invited to. In her hand was a large brown envelope. Her eyes met mine, but there were no tears, just a cold resolve that hit me like a punch to the gut. "I'm tired, Logan," she said, her voice steady, almost rehearsed. I set down my keys, feeling the weight of the day pressing on me. Tired of what Harper work was long, but we can talk tomorrow. She cut me off with a sharp shake of her head. No, I'm tired of this, of us. You're a good man, Logan, but good doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't build a future. I don't want to die poor. The words stung, slicing through the air between us. She thrust the envelope at my chest, the divorce papers. I caught it, my fingers numb as I stared at the legal jargon blurring before my eyes. Outside, I heard the low rumble of an engine, a Maserati, sleek and expensive, idling in the driveway. I didn't need to ask who was waiting for her. The pieces fell into place, the late nights, the new clothes, the distant looks. "Anything you want to say?" she asked, her tone challenging, almost hoping I'd beg. I held her gaze for a moment, searching for the woman I'd married, the one who'd laughed with me over cheap pizza on our first date. But she was gone. "I wish you the life you want," I said quietly. She scoffed, turning on her heel. The door slammed behind her and the Maserati's engine revved, fading into the rain. The house felt emptier than ever. I stood there, papers in hand, until a small voice broke the silence. "Dad, where's Mom?" Mason, my 5-year-old son, peeked out from his bedroom door, rubbing his eyes. His pajamas were rumpled, and he clutched his stuffed bear like a lifeline. I knelt down, pulling him into my arms. "Mom's gone, buddy, but I'm right here. I'll always be here." He buried his face in my shoulder, and I held him tight, the scent of his shampoo mixing with the oil on my clothes. Outside, the rain pounded the roof, drowning out the world. I didn't cry, not then. But inside, my heart cracked in two, one half for Mason, who deserved better, and the other for the woman who'd walked away without a backward glance. Viewers, what would you do if your wife left you for a richer man, abandoning everything you built together? Drop your thoughts in the comments. She left me for being poor. Unaware, I was heir to $500 million 5 years later. She stood at my gate, Part 2. A phone call, and a truth that turned my world upside down. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the rain from last night leaving puddles in the driveway. I woke up with Mason curled against me on the couch where we'd fallen asleep. His little chest rose and fell steadily, oblivious to the storm that had just upended our lives. I gently untangled myself, my body aching from the uncomfortable position, and started the routine. Breakfast for him, oatmeal with sliced bananas, his favorite. I packed his lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, and got him dressed for school. He didn't ask about Harper again, but his eyes searched the kitchen as if expecting her to appear from around the corner. We drove to his kindergarten in silence, my old truck rumbling over the wet streets of Tucson. I dropped him off, watching him wave from the classroom door, and felt a pang in my chest. How was I going to explain this to him? How did a 5-year-old understand that his mom had chosen a different life? I headed back home. The divorce papers still crumpled on the coffee table where I'd left them. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone, wondering if I should call a lawyer or just sign the damn things and move on. That's when the phone buzzed, 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I checked the voicemail. Mr. Logan Carter, this is Gerald Hawthorne from Raymond and Hawthorne Law Firm. It's urgent regarding your Uncle Benjamin Carter. Please call back as soon as possible. Uncle Benjamin. I hadn't spoken to him in months. He was the reclusive type, living out in the desert, tinkering with inventions and avoiding people. Last I'd heard, he was healthy, or at least that's what his rare postcard suggested. I dialed back, and Hawthorne answered on the first ring. Mr. Carter, thank you for calling. I'm sorry to inform you that your uncle passed away 2 weeks ago. Heart failure. He left specific instructions for me to contact you personally. The news hit me like a brick. Benjamin was my only family left besides Mason. My parents had died young, and he'd been like a father figure, albeit a distant one. Hawthorne asked me to come to the office downtown immediately. I agreed, my mind reeling. The law firm was in a sleek building on East Congress Street, all glass and polished marble that made me feel out of place in my grease-stained jeans. Hawthorne, an older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, greeted me in a conference room lined with leather-bound books. He slid a thick folder across the table. My condolences again. Benjamin was a unique man. He left everything to you, his entire estate. I flipped open the folder, expecting maybe a small inheritance enough to cover a few months' rent. But as I read, my hands started to shake. The list was endless: 7 commercial properties in Colorado, 12 million shares in a leading renewable energy company, investment funds in tech stocks, and an 8% stake in a startup gearing up for an IPO. Total valuation at current market rates, Hawthorne said, pointing to the bottom line, exceeds $500 million. I stared at him, the room spinning. This can't be right. Uncle Benjamin lived in a trailer. He drove a beat-up Jeep. He never mentioned any of this. Hawthorne nodded sympathetically. He was a brilliant investor, made his fortune in the early days of solar tech and biotech. But he valued privacy above all, lived simply to avoid attention. And there's a condition in the will: you must keep this inheritance secret for 12 months. No announcements, no changes to your lifestyle that might draw suspicion. Not even to family. Benjamin wanted you to build character before wielding power, as he put it. Family. The word stung. Harper was gone and Mason was too young to understand. I thought of her words from last night, "Good doesn't pay the bills," and felt a bitter twist in my gut. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. For Mason. For us. "I accept," I said, finally signing the documents. Hawthorne handed me a sealed envelope with initial access codes to a trust fund for immediate needs, but I tucked it away. I wasn't ready to touch it yet. The next 12 months blurred into a quiet transformation. I kept my job at the garage fixing cars during the day, but at night I studied. Online courses in business management, real estate, and philanthropy. I used a small portion of the trust to open a chain of auto repair shops across Arizona focusing on fair wages and benefits for single parents, people like me now. The shops were modest, nothing flashy, but they turned profits quickly. I donated anonymously to local charities, setting up a scholarship fund for orphaned kids in Tucson. My life stayed simple, the same old truck-rented house, cotton shirts from the thrift store. Mason and I built routines, park visits on weekends, bedtime stories about inventors like his great-uncle. He asked about Harper less and less, and I never badmouthed her. I didn't contact her either. She'd made her choice, walking out that door. Mia chose to grow in silence, brick by brick, turning pain into purpose. By the end of the year, I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I was ready to step into the light, but on my terms. She left me for being poor, unaware. I was heir to $500 million. 5 years later, she stood at my gate. Part 3, when? What she thought was victory turned into a life. Crumbling day by day, 3 years had passed since that rainy night, and my life had transformed in ways I never imagined. The 12-month secrecy period was long over, and I'd quietly stepped into my role as heir to Uncle Benjamin's empire. I expanded the auto repair chain into a network across Arizona and Texas. Each shop, not just fixing cars, but offering apprenticeships for at-risk youth. The Carter Foundation grew too, a nonprofit funding education and community programs named after the man who'd believed in second chances. Mason, now 8, was thriving straight A's in school, a budding interest in robotics, and a resilience that made me proud every day. We lived modestly still in a rented house on the outskirts of Tucson, but I funneled profits into investments that multiplied the fortune. Renewable energy deals, tech startups. I managed it all from a small office above one of my garages, blending my old mechanic's hands with new boardroom savvy. I heard about Harper through mutual friends, the kind who still whispered updates out of pity or curiosity. At first, I didn't want to know. She'd chosen her path and I'd forged mine, but bits trickled in anyway. The glamorous life she'd chased with that CEO, lavish parties and Phoenix high-rises, vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. For a while, it seemed she'd gotten exactly what she wanted, a world of luxury far from our poor existence. But then the cracks appeared. The CEO, some hotshot in finance named Victor Hale, got tangled in an insider trading scandal. Headlines splashed across local news arrests, frozen assets, the whole empire crumbling under federal scrutiny. Word was Harper had married him quickly after our divorce, basking in the wealth. But when the feds came knocking, she lost everything tied to him. The penthouse, the cars, even her jewelry collection pawned off to cover legal fees. She filed for her own divorce amid the chaos, but walked away with nothing but debts and a newborn son from the marriage. Friends said she moved into a run-down apartment in Phoenix's South Side, the kind with thin walls and flickering lights. She took up freelance work as an online marketer for cosmetics, hawking lipsticks and creams on social media to barely scrape by. 2 personal bankruptcies. In as many years, they said her credit ruined her once sharp confidence dulled by rejection after rejection from job interviews. I didn't seek this out. It found me. One evening, as I sat reviewing foundation grants on my laptop, an old acquaintance from our married days texted, "Heard about Harper rough times, thought you should know." Attached was a screenshot of her social media profile posts about starting over and lessons learned. But the comments were sparse, her follower count dwindling. I felt a twinge not of satisfaction, but of quiet sorrow. She'd thrown away a stable life for illusions of grandeur, and now reality had caught up. Mason occasionally asked about her, wondering why she never called on his birthday. I'd explain gently. People make choices, son. Sometimes they lead far away. He nodded, wise beyond his years, and we'd move on to building model cars or planting seeds in our backyard garden. Then came the day she discovered the truth. I didn't plan it. The media did. A local business journal ran a feature on me, Logan Carter from mechanic to philanthropic powerhouse, heir to a $500 million empire. The article detailed my inheritance, the secrecy clause, and how I'd turned it into a force for good. There was a photo of me and Mason at the Foundation's new community center in Flagstaff, him grinning ear to ear beside a plaque reading, "Carter Foundation for Second Chances." It went viral in Tucson circles, shared on social media with captions like, "Local Heroes, Rags to Riches Story." I knew she'd see it eventually, and she did. A week later, another text from that same friend. Harper reached out. She's in shock. Asked if it was true. I didn't respond. What was there to say she'd left me because I couldn't provide the life she craved, convinced I was holding her back? Now the irony stared back at her from every screen. The man she dismissed as poor had been sitting on a fortune all along. I imagined her in that cramped apartment, scrolling through the article, her coffee cup shattering on the floor as the pieces connected. The emerald dress from that night, the Maserati waiting outside, symbols of her escape, now mocking her in hindsight. Her life continued to unravel. The marketing gigs dried up. Clients pulled out amid rumors of her unstable past. She faced eviction notices, scraping together rent from odd jobs, waitressing at a diner during the scorching Arizona summers, her once manicured hands raw from scrubbing plates. The child from her second marriage, a boy named Liam, added to the strain. Custody battles drained what little she had left. Friends distanced themselves, tired of the drama. She was alone, truly alone, in a way I'd once feared for myself. Through it all, I focused on what mattered. Mason's laughter echoing in our home, the kids at the foundation getting scholarships, the quiet growth of my investments. Harper's downfall wasn't my doing. It was the consequence of her choices. But deep down, I wondered if she'd ever reflect on that night, on the man she'd underestimated. The article had exposed my secret, and soon she'd come seeking what she'd thrown away. I braced for it not with anger, but with the calm of someone who'd learned to build without needing validation. Viewers, what would you feel if you discovered your ex's hidden fortune after leaving them for someone richer? Drop your thoughts in the comments. She left me for being poor, unaware. I was heir to $500 million, 5 years later. She stood at my gate. Part 4. The ex returns, but the door is no longer open. A month after the article went viral, I was settling into my new routine at the Flagstaff estate. What had once been an empty plot of land was now a sprawling 3,000 square meter haven. Manicured gardens for quiet reflection, a playground for Mason and his friends, and an attached community center where locals could access free workshops on financial literacy and job skills. I'd built it all with the foundation's funds, blending Uncle Benjamin's legacy with my own vision of giving back. Mason loved it here, the fresh mountain air, the space to run, and the art classes with his teacher Elena. A kind woman who'd become a steady presence in our lives. She wasn't flashy like Harper had been. She valued the simple things like sketching sunsets or teaching kids to express their feelings through colors. That afternoon I was in the kitchen brewing ginger tea when the gate buzzer sounded. I checked the security camera on my phone. There she was. Harper standing outside the wrought iron gates in a faded sundress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that looked more weary than stylish. My heart didn't race like it might have years ago. Instead, a calm resolve settled over me. I pressed the intercom. "Harper," I said evenly. The gate swung open and she walked up the driveway, her steps hesitant on the gravel path. I met her at the front door, tea in hand, wearing a plain white shirt and jeans. No need for pretense, she'd already seen the headlines. "Logan," she started, her voice cracking slightly. I know about everything now. I just wanted to talk." I nodded, stepping aside, but not inviting her in. We stood on the porch, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. "I'm listening," I replied. Her eyes welled up and she fidgeted with her hands. I was wrong. So wrong. I got caught up in the glamour, the promises of a better life. Victor seemed like the answer to all my insecurities, but every night since I've regretted it, I miss Mason. I miss you, the real you, not the image I built in my head. I let her words hang in the air, sipping my tea. The steam rose between us like a barrier. "Mason's doing well," I said finally. "He's 10 now. Top of his class, loves planting in the garden. He's got a self-respect that comes from knowing he's loved unconditionally." She wiped a tear. I didn't dare reach out. I was afraid he'd hate me. "He doesn't hate you," I assured her, "but he's learned to live without the people who walk away. That's a hard lesson for a kid, but he's stronger for it." Harper stepped closer, her voice pleading. "I'm not here for your money, Logan, I swear. I just want a chance to make amends, to be part of his life again. Part of yours, if you'll let me." I set the tea down on the railing, meeting her gaze. The woman before me looked diminished, the fire in her eyes replaced by desperation. I thought back to that night in Tucson, the divorce papers hitting my chest, her laughter as she left. "Chances aren't given just because someone asks," I said softly. "You walked away when you thought I had nothing to offer. That choice closed doors you can't reopen now." "But I can change," she insisted, her voice breaking. "Please let me see him just once." I shook my head. "When Mason's ready to meet you, I won't stand in the way. But today, knowing he's in his art class right now with Elena, the woman you once called beneath our level, in a message I found later. She's been more of a constant in his life than you ever were." Harper's shoulders slumped, tears streaming freely now. "I was a fool, blinded by what I thought I deserved. But seeing you now, what you've built, it shows me how much I lost." I felt a flicker of pity, but it didn't sway me. "You've got to live with your choices, Harper, just like I did. I built this for Mason, for the future we deserved. You're welcome to write to him through the foundation if you want, but rebuilding trust, that's not mine to give." She nodded, defeated, and turned to leave. As she walked back down the driveway, I watched from the porch, the gates closing behind her with a soft click. Elena emerged from the house, then paint on her hands from the class. "Everything okay?" she asked, slipping her hand into mine. "Yeah," I said, squeezing back. "Just closing an old chapter." Viewers, what would you do if your ex showed up at your door after years begging for a second chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. She left me for being poor. Unaware. I was heir to $500 million. 5 years later, she stood at my gate. Part 5. Not everyone who returns gets the door opened, especially when they left without looking back. A week after our porch conversation, a letter arrived at the community center addressed to me through the foundation. It was from Harper, her handwriting shaky on the envelope. I opened it in my office, the winter sun filtering through the windows onto stacks of grant applications. The words spilled out admissions of regret, how money had blinded her to what truly mattered, and a plea not to be forgotten by Mason. "I don't ask to be your wife again," she wrote. "Just a person our son doesn't erase from his memory." I read it twice, feeling the echo of old pain, but no pull to respond. I'd built my life around forward motion, not revisiting closed chapters. The letter went into a drawer unanswered. My focus stayed on Mason and the work, expanding scholarships, hosting community events. Harper's words were hers to carry now. That winter, as snow dusted the Flagstaff Hills, I took Mason to an orphanage in Tucson for a holiday drive. We loaded my truck with wrapped gifts, warm clothes, and books, items funded by the foundation. Mason helped hand them out, his face lighting up with each child's smile. A local reporter captured the moment, me kneeling beside him, both of us in matching scarves, the Carter Foundation banner in the background. The photo made the papers headlined, "Local Philanthropist Logan Carter Gives Back." I felt a quiet pride, not for the recognition, but for showing Mason the value of kindness over wealth. From afar, Harper watched. I learned later from a mutual contact that she'd seen us that day standing across the street near a bus stop, too afraid to approach. In her faded coat, clutching a coffee cup, she observed the life she'd walked away from, a father and son, bonded stronger than ever, surrounded by gratitude from strangers. She didn't wave or call out. She just stood there, the bus pulling up and carrying her away into the cold. That image lingered with me, but it didn't change anything. The greatest revenge isn't anger or spite, it's living better than those who once looked down on you. I'd turned betrayal into purpose, poverty into legacy. Harper had chosen her path, and I'd chosen mine, one that no longer included open doors for those who'd slammed them shut. Viewers, if you were me, would you forgive her? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true-to-life stories.